Welcome back. Welcome back. It is now time for our incredible keynote speaker, Mia Mingus, who I know many of you have heard of. Mia is joining us virtually, calling in from Atlanta. She's been a co-conspirator and teammate with the AAPI Women Lead team through these past couple of years, and we are so appreciative of all the work online and in person. Thank you so much, Mia. Please feel free to continue using the hashtags I'm Ready 2022 and Reimagine Everything as we continue to learn from one another and build together. Please, everyone, give a warm welcome round of applause to Mia Mingus.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. This is when it's starting, right? I don't know. I'm going to just go and somebody tell me if it's not. Thank you for having me. I'm calling in to you from Muskogee Creek lands. Actually, I'm a bit south of Atlanta. So I'm in McDonough, Georgia, which is either a small town, a small city or a big town, depending on how you look at it. I'm calling in specifically from the lower Muskogee Creek tribe, and I am a Korean woman presenting person. I have long brown hair, black glasses. I'm wearing silver hoop earrings and a green shirt that's kind of like beigey green. But thank you so much to AIPA Women Lead for having me and for inviting me to speak and for organizing this. I know that things like this take an incredible amount of work to put on, not just the planning, but the execution of it. So every time I put on a conference, there is so much work, especially behind the scenes, that a lot of the folks who are participants don't see. So thank them as much as you can whenever you see them for all their hard work. Thank you all also for your important work that you do, and all of you all out there who are joining us. Thank you. I used to live in the Bay Area, and so it's like so lovely to be back with so many of you all who live out there. So I love the theme that you've chosen for this year's conference, Reimagine Everything. And I think that I was actually there when Grace Lee Boggs was giving this talk, but I don't know if that's for sure. But I love the talk and the speech that inspired this. Whatever event I was at, I remember watching her and Angela Davis together on stage in conversation at UC Berkeley in March of 2012. And it was really, truly a magical event. And I just still, to this day, feel so lucky to have been there and to have been able to attend. But she talked about many of the same things that she talked about in that speech. And, I thought a lot about what I wanted to share today because there's really so much that I could say under this theme. I mean, after all, it is reimagine everything, not just reimagine some things. And, like at first I thought I would talk about all the many, many, many things that need to be reimagined, much of which, she named in her speech. But I think ultimately I realized that one of the main things that stops us from being able to reimagine the world that we want and the world that we long for and how it could be different, how our lives could be different, is fear. I think fear is one of the biggest obstacles we have, whether that's fear of what people will think, fear of the new and unknown, fear of discomfort, fear of failure and making mistakes, fear of our own power. Fear is such a huge, huge obstacle. And I think that it's one of the most challenging barriers that we face when it comes to not only changing things, but even in simply reimagining things, even in just thinking that things could or should be different. And so that's what I want to focus my remarks on today, because as somebody who does work in terms of my work, in terms of the building alternative side of work, not just resisting against the world we don't want, but like building the world that we actually do want, primarily through transformative justice and disability justice. I'm engaged in that work every day, all the time. And I see the way that fear stops us at every point almost. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. So I want to just say, first and foremost, we live in a society that is fueled by fear completely. It manufactures fear and profits off of it. And it knows it must continuously produce fear, whether in the form of danger or violence, competition, destruction, crisis, isolation, shame, and the list goes on and on and on. And they do that so that they can maintain control. I think that we have all been shaped by this fear to one extent or another in so many different ways. We are afraid of what others will think of us, afraid of the past, afraid of the future. We are afraid of making a mistake, afraid of being in the spotlight, afraid of not being in the spotlight, afraid of being too loud or too quiet, too big, too small, afraid of being too much or not enough, afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of each other, afraid of ourselves. One of my most favorite quotes comes from Maya Angelou, who said, quote, "Courage is the most important of all virtues, because without courage, you cannot practice any other virtue consistently. You can practice any virtue erratically, but nothing consistently without courage," unquote. I think one of the biggest obstacles we face in reimagining is courage, or more specifically, our lack of courage, both individually and collectively. There is no way that we can reimagine if we are led by fear, if we are oriented from a place of fear. There is no way that we can dream the kinds of really big dreams we need to dream if we are doing that from a place of scarcity and fear, if we don't believe that our dreams are worthy and possible. We have to get braver. If we want to reimagine everything, we have to get braver. And we have to cultivate courage in our everyday lives, not just on panels or at conferences when we talk about social justice, but in our everyday lives. We must cultivate courage, not just in our work fighting for justice, but inside of ourselves, inside of our relationships, inside of our communities. Only then will we be able to truly reimagine and break through the bars that oppression and trauma have created, which limit what we believe is possible. Because that is one of the key things that trauma does. It shrinks and dims what we believe is possible. It convinces us that we are only worthy of the crumbs, or in many cases, that we are not worthy of anything, even the crumbs. It makes us believe that we are not powerful, that we must be deserving of the terrible things that happen to us, and that we should accept the bare minimum and not question it. It whispers, right, that we are not strong, smart, loved, committed, desirable, or good enough to change things. It shames us into submission and dulls our desires until we are passively accepting things the way they are, until that becomes our default in the world and in our personal lives. I mean, I think about even just imposter syndrome and how so many of us believe that we don't deserve good things, even when good things happen to us, even when people acknowledge us for how much we've done or all of the amazing things we've done. We think, instead of, oh, wow, now that must mean that I actually am deserving of it, we think, how was I able to trick these people into thinking that I am actually somebody who does good things or is deserving of good things, right? That's what we believe instead, because I believe because of oppression and trauma so often, because of the way that our shame manifests. And, because of this, right? Because of what trauma does to us, most of us don't know how to actually dream big. Most of us don't know how to tap in to our revolutionary imaginations. We get told we need to dream big and, quote, reimagine everything, but we don't know how to do it. We only know how to dream small, and sometimes really, really small. Most of us don't know how to imagine at a scale as large as, quote, everything. The loud voice inside of us and the people all around us belittle our dreams with the all too common, right? It's not very realistic, actually. Or that's impossible. Or that's just the way things are. You can't change it. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that about transformative justice. It's not realistic. It's never going to happen. That's impossible, right? Oh, it's just in people's human nature to be violent and to be harmful. So you can't change that. And because of trauma and fear, it's often enough to quiet us, right? People telling us that is often enough to quiet us, to still our enthusiasm, to keep us in line, to make us doubt ourselves. So if we're serious about reimagining everything, and I think we should be, then we must start dreaming bigger. We must start believing that anything is possible. Anything is possible. We must start to live into this powerful medicine. Things do not have to be the way they have always been. Things do not have to be done the way that we've always done them either. We can dream up a new world and build it. We can transform our pain and shame and trauma into healing and freedom and love. I believe that that is possible. We can remake this world and remake our lives together in a way that cares for the planet and all the beings that inhabit it. We can create justice together and grow the kind of communities and relationships with each other that our hearts and souls long for. But in order to do that, we must be courageous. We must be bold. Bold, not just think about it, but practice it. We must practice courage, not just admire courage when others are practicing it, but we ourselves must practice it. We must do the things that we are afraid to do. We must embrace risk and take leaps of faith. And we must cheer each other on every time we leap. What are the things that you are afraid to do that you're not doing right now? Do those things on this small level to hopefully build up your skills so that when we get to the place where we're able to actually not just reimagine things like work and labor and education, right? Not just reimagine those things, but actually do them. When we're at that point, you have the skills to do it because you've already been practicing in your own life. You are less afraid. And most importantly, and I know this is going to be very difficult, it's much easier said than done, we must value failure. I know as hard as this is, we have to figure out a way to be less afraid of failure, even if that's just a little bit less every single day. But if we are going to embrace risk and practice courage consistently, like Maya Angelou reminds us of, and like we have to and need to, if we're actually going to do this, meaning if we're actually going to change the world, then we will also know that we will fail in that. If we're constantly leaping and taking risks, yes, some of them might pan out, and also a lot of them will probably not. If we're going to get into the habit of choosing to leap, then we will not always fly. Sometimes we will fall. Sometimes we will fail. Sometimes they will be small defeats and small mistakes, and other times they will be spectacular failures. But all of them, no matter how big or how small, will hold important lessons and information that can help us to do better the next time. All of them will help us to grow and transform because remember, comfort and transformation do not live on the same block. Discomfort, is required for growth. Discomfort is required for transformation. That is true in our personal lives, and that is true for the world that we want to build. Anytime I start working with somebody new, Ever since I started Soil, I say, are you willing to fail together? Are you excited about failing together? Are you willing to make mistakes together? If they say yes, okay, I'm happy to work together. Because I want to be courageous. And I know that that means that I won't get everything right all the time. And I value that and I embrace that as a good thing. When I fail, I know, great, what can I learn from this so that I can do better next time? I don't need to wallow in it. I just need to learn from it. I just need to do better the next time. We must tap into the power of courage, true courage, not a courage shaped by patriarchy and its ravenous hunger for domination, harm, and destruction, but a sacred kind of courage that can awaken others to their own power and not scare them into submission or whet their appetite for superiority. A courage that can bend light, reconfigure time, and multiply what is possible. Have you ever witnessed true courage? Have you ever felt its transformative power? The way it stops time? I have seen people stand up and be brave, and I have seen the way that time stops. Everything that was going on stops. And we are all just intensely present with them. The way that when you witness true courage, the way that it opens you up, it doesn't shut you down. The way it rearranges something inside of you and inspires your own courage, other people's own courage. The way it completely upends the current moment and creates more possibilities, especially things that weren't thought to be possible before. Moving from what is to what could be. That's what I'm talking about. That is reimagining in practice, reimagining in real time. That is a kind of sorcery and magic. What are the things that you are accepting that you do not have to? What are the things that you have accepted that could be reshaped, remade, reimagined? Because the world we imagine, the world we long for, will require tremendous courage from us again and again and again. This is not a one-time thing. There's not going to be one big time where we all practice courage and then it's all wonderful and done. That's not how it's going to be. We will need to experiment and try new things, constantly rethinking what we thought we knew and then try again. Because if we do not practice courage, if we do not become incredibly skilled at courage, we will not be able to create the world and the relationships necessary for that world to exist. I want us to learn how to wield courage, how to wield our individual and collective courageous power. Are we in the spooky season or what? Let's all become sorcerers of courage, or whatever word you want to use. Because the forces we are up against are formidable, and they will not cede their ground peacefully. I'm not only talking about systems of violence and oppression, or the climate crisis, or the current pandemic and future pandemics. Those are, of course, part of it. But I'm also talking about things like shame and trauma, isolation and loneliness, hopelessness and despair, hate and punishment, revenge and greed, and fear, so much fear. We must do the hard work of befriending our fear and listening to it and learn what it is trying to teach us. What is your fear trying to teach you? I want to be clear that I'm not saying we should be fearless. That's not possible, nor is it something that I think we should want. Fear is not something to fear. The fear of fear is something to fear, but fear is not something to fear, because fear is there ultimately to protect us. It speaks an ancient language that we don't even realize that we know. And fear is what allows for courage to exist. Because we can only truly practice courage when we are afraid. True courage only reveals itself when we are afraid, when our voice trembles. We can learn to listen to, understand, and welcome the quickening of our pulse, the urgent beating of our hearts, our breath as it catches in our chest. Courage is a skill that we can cultivate, just like any other skill. It takes consistent work and practice, of course, just like anything else. We can learn how not to shrink ourselves or settle for what's easy or expected. We can tap into our sacred knowledge and awaken our courageous spirit to make that apology, to speak up, to say no, to be the first one to reach out or the first one to express how we feel. And please remember, the scale at which you practice courage does not alter its fundamental essence, potency, or power. Its properties remain the same, no matter the scale at which it is being practiced, whether it's small things or big things, whether it's you who is conflict avoidant being able to finally be in conflict, or whether it's us completely upending and ending gentrification in the Bay Area forever, for example. It doesn't matter the scale. It's still the same. The courage is still the same. We must move from inspiration to practice, from observers and admirers to players. We can share our stories of courage and failures with each other. We can talk about what went well and what we learned and what we are excited to do differently next time. We can not only say the world needs to be reimagined, but we can start to practice it in our own everyday lives, individually and collectively. We can normalize the practice of reimagining by incorporating it into our daily and weekly and monthly lives. We can invest in and prioritize our own healing and support others to do the same. We can invest in and prioritize collective healing as well. In transformative justice, we understand that we cannot separate incidences of harm from the conditions that create and perpetuate them. The same is also true, though, for the things we desire. We can ask ourselves, what kinds of conditions support reimagining and the practice of courage? We can build those conditions. This work is all of our work to do. If we want a better world, then we must be the ones to roll up our sleeves and make that happen. I say this especially to those of you thinking to yourself, who am I to reimagine the world? Surely there are smarter and better people than me to do that. And what I want you to know is when I say all of us, I mean all of us. It is all of our responsibility. There are a million different kinds of things to do. So get in where you fit in and let's get to work because it's all hands on deck. As Grace Lee Boggs has also said, quote, you cannot change any society unless you take responsibility for it, unless you see yourself as belonging to it and responsible for changing it, unquote. So I want you to remember, especially when you feel yourself becoming complacent or surrender into hopelessness or apathy, I want you to remember that everything that exists today exists because someone dreamt it up and decided to put in the work to make it a reality. In that way, the world is truly just made up. And if it's made up, then it can be remade up. So dream big. Imagine everything anew, even if it sounds bizarre or impossible. Take the time to follow where those imaginings lead because you never know where they may take you and what you might find along the way and what kinds of inspiration they may spark. Create the things that you wish existed in the world. You don't need a ton of people to do great things or to change the world for the better. I want you to learn how to risk and fail and learn and grow, and then risk and fail and learn and grow again and rinse and repeat. This is the path. That is the path to transformation. That is the path to changing the world. Because we need you, every single one of you. We need your big dreams. We need your wild reimaginings. We need all of your humanity and heart and capacity for love and liberation. Because all of this work to reimagine and change the world is ultimately about love. We do this work in service of love, love of our people, love of the planet, love of ourselves. The practice of courage is really the practice of love, because love requires risk. And sadly, we are often too afraid to take those risks that we need to take for love. We have all too often abandoned love in the face of fear, even as we desperately ache for love. Courage is the key to the world we want, the love we long for, and the consistent work it will take to get us there. When you reimagine, dream bigger than you think you should, and be bold enough and free enough to believe that anything is possible. And remember, as the saying goes, everything you want is on the other side of fear. Thank you all so much for having me. I hope your conference is wonderful.